Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift into the swirling sands of ancient Egypt, where pharaohs strut in golden sandals, conspirators whisper behind painted pillars, and the threat of losing your head for the tiniest political misstep feels as real as the sting of the desert sun. You stand here, breathing in that scorched wind off the Nile, eyes flicking nervously to the palace guards. If you say the wrong thing, or even look the wrong way, you might end up feeding crocodiles before the next sunrise. Yeah, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your city and local time below. Let me know how far this bedtime journey is traveling tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the courtyard of a limestone palace, sunlight bouncing off painted columns, where petty insults could spiral into fatal accusations. In a world where alliances shift faster than the Nile's flood, people clutch at tiny pockets of peace. And believe it or not, those pockets came in the form of simple wooden game boards, scored with tiny squares and polished pieces, worn smooth by centuries of anxious fingertips. You sense the tension behind those thick doors, where power-hungry scribes and jostling generals constantly sharpen their tongues. The court is a dangerous place to talk too much, so you slip off your sandals, sink into a woven reed mat, and roll the bones, literally little stick dice clattering on a Senate board. Right here, you discover a place to leave politics at the threshold. The game is a social mirage, a distraction that soothes the edges of ambition. As you move your pawns along the carved squares, you remember that even a mighty pharaoh once used these very same games to cool the fury in his veins. Historians still argue whether games were truly political tools or purely an act of relaxation. But your pulse slows anyway, following the path of those ancient squares. The wood is cool beneath your fingertips. Your opponent gives you a half smile, eyes trained to spot any hint of a lie. You play as though everything rests on these moves, because outside this shaded patio, everything really does. In here, however, no one is demanding taxes. No one is bribing priests. No one is plotting your convenient disappearance. The steady rhythm of game pieces sliding across wood is a lullaby against the shrieks of palace intrigue. You steal a glance through the lattice window, where a royal messenger scuttles by in a panic, scroll tucked under his arm. Somewhere, someone is probably about to lose an entire estate or a crucial military post, but your little world is safe for now, protected by tiny square tiles and the rules everyone agrees to obey. One noble, his beard styled in a fashionable forked braid, breathes out a deep sigh as he sets down a pawn. This is how they manage their terror. They hide it inside playful bravado, turning random luck into a shield. A well-timed joke, "You'd better let the gods pick the winner," earns a chuckle, breaks the icy silence. 3 rows away, another pair of players trade mild insults, then laugh like brothers, momentarily forgetting whose family tried to poison whom last year. You lean back against the wall, feeling the warm clay press against your shoulders. Maybe, you think, this is the only true freedom they have. A game, a roll of sticks, a moment to breathe before tomorrow's backstabbing. The air tastes faintly of lotus blossom incense, almost too sweet, making you drowsy. You blink, watching the painted eyes on your game pieces stare up at you, as if even they know how bad things could get if the gossip ever turned your way. In the distance, a scribe calls the results of a tax census, sending shockwaves through the halls. Coins will change hands, reputations will collapse, and your host may suddenly become a nobody tomorrow. But tonight, with the game board between you, the tension softens. It's a bit like grabbing pizza with a rival coworker after a brutal office feud. Only, in this case, you might be executed instead of fired if you mess it up. You're still here, still breathing, because you kept your mouth shut and let the dice do the talking. That's the secret, isn't it? Even if the stakes outside were life and death, the game gave everyone permission to laugh, to bluff, to show off a bit of skill, without letting real anger spill over. Historians still debate whether these games taught strategy for warfare, or whether they simply dulled the dagger points of everyday tension. A temple guard shuffles past, shooting a bored glance at the players, then moves on. Nobody pays attention to a harmless game. Maybe that's the best disguise in the world. You can almost hear echoes of modern politicians ducking out to play golf or hit the poker table, leaving their scandals and responsibilities on hold. Different century, same mental shield. A breeze lifts a loose bit of papyrus, fluttering like a trapped moth. You place a finger on it, feeling the ink still damp from some official's scribbled memo. Nothing matters more than surviving until dawn. But you're oddly calm. In this shaded corner, you find the stillness to plan, to watch, to guess who might betray you next, and, most crucially, to remember how to keep smiling. A rough cough from your opponent signals the next move. You pick up the throwing sticks, and with a steady hand, cast your fate once again across polished squares. It is at once a prayer and a dare, a challenge to luck itself. The night creeps closer, oil lamps sputtering. Gossip never dies in these walls, but you, tonight at least, don't have to feed its hunger. The rattle of the sticks is the only truth you need right now, the only truth you trust. And so, under the gaze of painted gods, your game goes on, keeping the claws of politics at bay just a little bit longer. You settle deeper into the dusty cushions, rolling your shoulders as the sweat slowly dries on your skin. The game in front of you seems to shimmer a bit under the weak flame of an oil lamp. It's Sonnet tonight, of course, the board laid out in 30 squares that seem innocent enough, until you remember that these little boxes may have kept entire kingdoms from collapse more than once. The pharaoh himself, ruler of this creaking kingdom, has been known to calm his roiling rage with these same squares. You move a polished pawn down its lane, hearing the faint scrape of wood on wood. Somewhere down the hallway, a shrill voice protests over a missed shipment of grain. You exhale through your nose. There is always a crisis. Someone's always behind on taxes. Someone's always plotting to marry a rival's daughter. Here, though, with these humble tokens of palm wood, you claim a tiny kingdom of your own. The pharaoh, after all, faces unimaginable stress. He's God on earth, sure, but he's also a man with an ulcer the size of Memphis from trying to keep the priests and soldiers from each other's throats. Historians still argue whether the pharaoh truly had any personal power beyond elaborate ceremony, or if he was just a puppet of his priestly court. But what they agree on is that he sat down to sonnet, night after night, pushing back doom with every roll. You place another piece, then lean forward, candlelight dancing in your eyes. Senet is no casual amusement. It is a coded universe of fate, luck, and calculated maneuver, with its own rituals and whispered superstitions. You can sense them still, each roll practically an invocation, a plea to the gods. Some said winning Senet meant the gods smiled on you. Some said losing was a hint that the afterlife wouldn't welcome you. Quirky, maybe, but try telling that to a pharaoh who saw omens in a spilled beer jug. Your opponent, a courtier with eyebrows so perfectly plucked it's borderline sorcery, snorts and challenges your move. You answer with a grin, fingers itching to toss the sticks again. In here, a game can do what even armed guards cannot: settle tempers, diffuse slander, and hush down the constant worry of spies. The air is thick with incense, probably hiding the stench of fear better than any perfume. You roll again, a perfect throw. The courtier makes a face of mock horror, and you allow yourself a laugh, soft and cautious, like a cat testing a new path. If laughter is medicine, then sonnet is the spoon that delivers it. It breaks you free from the dread of living under a dozen pairs of watchful eyes. In the corners, servants stand by, eyes lowered, no doubt memorizing every smirk and side glance for later retelling. One day, those stories might be weapons, but tonight, the servants just see two people almost equals, joking and teasing as they race pawns across the board. The pharaoh's favorite table, you recall, had a smooth ivory inlay, and rumor claimed it was used to decide who would be forgiven after a political scandal. Play a good match, they said, and you might keep your land. Lose, and you'd better start packing for a desert exile. Historians still debate whether that's a dramatic legend or the raw truth, but given how carefully people watch these games, you wouldn't be surprised either way. Another breeze tickles your cheek. The thick night outside is full of cicadas, their endless drone layered like a distant lullaby. You glance around the stone hall, seeing painted murals of the gods hunting hippos, sailing the night sky, or smiting enemies. They watch you too, those gods, painted eyes sharp enough to see every tiny betrayal. But here, on your board, you get to steer the future, if only for a while. Each pawn under your command feels like a tiny army, marching to victory without the blood, without the gossip, without the risk. The pharaoh would understand. He, too, needed a place to test strategies, to think without a chorus of courtiers rattling in his ears. Your rival hisses through his teeth as you move a second piece to safety. The next move is his, and he knows it's risky. He taps his chin, studies the throw sticks like they might leap up and bite him, then casts them with a resigned shrug. The sticks bounce, tumble, then land in a way that makes him groan. You can't help it. A chuckle escapes you, bubbling into the night air. Your laughter is joined by a brief chorus from another group of players nearby. A joke about how the gods must be picking favorites, how maybe even Osiris likes to see a good underdog. Someone raises a cup in toast. It is a gentle moment, a rebellion against all the harshness of the real world. Your rival flicks a game piece off the board and pretends to faint dramatically. You nudge it back toward him with your toe, keeping the game alive. In the Grand Palace, in a place where a single misstep could trigger civil war, even this silly pantomime is a brave act. You are daring to live, daring to joke, daring to be human. You shift on your mat, the reeds creaking under you. Another lamp flickers, casting a strange, dancing shadow across the board. For a heartbeat, it looks like the god Thoth himself is watching, maybe scribbling your fate in his endless scrolls. You'd better play carefully. As your opponent lines up his next pawn, you can almost taste a bit of roasted duck carried in from the kitchens. The scent mingles with the spicy perfume of the players and the faint tang of fear that never leaves this place. A tiny smirk crosses your face. This is what the pharaoh lives through, night after night. And just like you, in the end, drowning in worries, wrapped in jewels, desperate for a pause button on the endless plotting. Senate is the pause, the only pause. It is the only place you can beat a prince or a priest fair and square. No daggers under the table, no bribed witnesses, no accidental scorpion stings. And as the game flows on, the pieces shifting like little soldiers on their own secret campaign, you remember that sometimes surviving means more than power. It means knowing where to let your guard down, even if only for an hour, with polished pawns as your silent, loyal bodyguards. The night has grown heavier, a slow, drowsy heat clinging to the walls as you rise from your Senate board and wander through the palace. You slip past the sleeping guards, past rows of empty wine jars, until you find another gathering in a courtyard bathed by torchlight. Here, nobles with perfumed beards lounge like lazy lions, their sandals kicked off, nursing cups of spiced wine that taste of dates in distant oases. They call to you with slurred laughter, waving you over to join them, and you settle into a circle where yet another game unfolds. This one is simpler, less rule-bound, but no less vital. The nobleman you face has a hawk tattoo on his wrist, marking him as a commander's son. You sense a thinly veiled arrogance, but under that peacock pride is the same raw terror everyone carries here. Games, you learn, are a way to keep the peace among these aristocrats. You place your wager, a handful of copper tokens, and join in their pastime. The board is polished ebony, its pieces shaped like tiny animals: a lion, a dog, a hare, a falcon. The players move them in patterns that look silly at first, but reveal a subtle, shifting dance of ambition. You roll the bones and feel the hush descend. No one mentions taxes or troop levies or marriages. They only study the board, hands resting on their knees like priests awaiting an oracle's answer. You catch the familiar whiff of baked bread from a distant oven, almost comically wholesome compared to these plotting hearts. One nobleman jokes, "Better I lose at dice than lose my estate." The others snicker, nodding solemnly. It's true, after all. Better a bad throw tonight than a bad alliance tomorrow. Historians still argue whether these games acted as secret negotiations in disguise or truly allowed a break from politics. But you can see how the jokes calm them, as if they can scrub away their worries with a few good rolls. You study your opponent's gaze, nervous, calculating, but softened. Maybe you're both remembering the same thing, that nobody is safe once the chatter starts. These boards, these painted figurines, are shields as much as toys, a tiny bulwark against slander and backstabbing. The air in the courtyard is perfumed with burning myrrh, covering up the rank odor of sweaty men and barking dogs nearby. You scratch at a mosquito bite on your calf, only half listening to another aristocrat brag about his pet monkey who can flip cups. The chatter is a protective hum, covering up how everyone is quietly terrified. When the hawk-tattooed nobleman rolls a pitiful throw, a ripple of sympathetic laughter circles the group. You can't help but grin, enjoying the moment of pure, harmless fun. In this place where anything you say might someday be twisted against you, there is something heroic about laughing so freely. The rules of this game might as well be holy law. No cheating, no accusations, no politics, just chance. In that, you see a kind of salvation. The flickering torchlight makes shadows leap like dancing cats across the walls, and you almost forget the crocodile dung sunscreen rumor you'd heard about nobles trying to protect their fragile, sunburned faces. Even these high-born men, dripping in jewelry, worry about skin damage. Apparently, some things never change. You push your piece forward and feel a strange sense of victory, even though you're not winning. You've won a moment of peace, and that feels worth more than copper or gold. One noble scratches his beard, studying you with a look that mixes respect and envy. Maybe he envies your calm. Maybe he envies that you found this tiny refuge and made it yours. The round ends, and the hawk-tattooed man leans over to refill your wine. You take a sip and let the honeyed warmth lull you. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear the Nile's night birds cooing beyond the palace walls, and the gentle rustle of reeds in the river. For a heartbeat, it's enough to believe you are safe. They start another round. Someone accidentally drops a piece, and everyone jumps before laughing it off, as though the gods themselves had jolted them. You chuckle, your voice blending with theirs, feeling the relief. Games, it turns out, make even the cruelest rumors wait outside the circle. One aristocrat, with rings stacked on every finger, boasts of having played a match against a priest of Thoth. He was the worst loser I've ever seen, he confides, to a wave of giggles. You raise your eyebrows, half surprised. So even a god's chosen servant could lose his temper over a dice roll. Historians still debate whether priests encourage gambling among nobles to keep them busy, or tried to ban it entirely, but either way, it seems to have stuck around. The flame sputters as someone adjusts a fresh torch. Warm orange light bounces across a woman's necklace of lapis beads, making her look briefly like a goddess come to life. You breathe in the scent of the torches, the faint bite of scorched oil mixing with desert breeze, and memorize this moment like a calm eye in the middle of a swirling sandstorm. The game carries on, slower now, the players more tired, but no one dares quit first. To leave the board is to invite conversation about real business, and nobody wants to break that fragile spell. You watch the hawk-tattooed nobleman fake a yawn, pretending he could leave if he wanted to, but you see the tremble in his hand as he holds the dice. He needs this escape more than air. You lean back, letting the board's patterns lull you, the repetitive movements slowing your heartbeat. It's almost a prayer, this rhythm, asking the gods to keep your name from some vengeful scribe's scroll. The night deepens, drawing you toward dreams, but you resist, watching another pawn take a last shaky step forward. In the hush that follows, you hear the wind against the reed mats, reminding you that outside this courtyard, the harsh world still claws and bites. But for now, you get one more roll, one more sip, one more fragile breath of peace, and you will take it gladly. The scent of barley bread and goat stew drifts on the wind as you slip through the palace gate, heading toward the pulsing heart of the city, the marketplace. Dawn's first pink light stains the walls, and the merchants are already setting up their awnings, calling out prices for fish, onions, spices, anything that might catch a copper or two. You move through them, drawn by the undercurrent of rumors, the steady churning of politics that clings to every deal. In this bustling maze of shouting sellers and bartering buyers, the chatter is dangerous. A single wrong word could be twisted, carried on the wind to some powerful ear, leading to disaster. That's why the merchants, sly and streetwise, have learned a secret: gaming tables. You push through a cluster of linen traders, then spot it, a battered wooden board marked with a coiled serpent. Mayhen, the game of the snake. Its design seems hypnotic, curling inward like a protective spell. A group of traders has gathered, elbows bumping, coins clinking, and no one is talking about whose donkey trampled whose stall or who bribed which tax collector. They are focused only on this ancient spiral. One trader, with a voice rough from years of haggling, grins as you approach. He waves you into a seat, explaining the rules with the same casual warmth you'd hear explaining how to salt fish. You thank him, fingers brushing over carved lion-headed pieces that once guarded the snake's coils. Historians still argue whether Mayhen was purely for fun or if it carried ritual blessings meant to protect players. But its power to block politics is obvious. You toss your first stone die and feel a jolt of childish glee. For a moment, you could be 7 again, tumbling dice in your father's courtyard. The snake's path winds ahead of you, a maze that absorbs worry like a sponge. Merchants who, just hours ago, were ready to accuse each other of theft or fraud, now trade gentle insults and jokes. Your lion must have fleas, someone teases, sending laughter rippling through the circle. The simple magic of Mayhen is that everyone understands its language. Move your piece, count. Laugh, no questions about trade licenses or Pharaoh's taxes. No ugly memories of grain shortages. Just the curve of the snake, drawing your attention away from every risky word. You glance over at a boy running between the stalls, his arms full of fresh-cut herbs. For a heartbeat, you envy him. He knows nothing of land disputes or extortion, only that if he hurries, he might get a copper from the baker for his bundle. Your lion token leaps ahead a few spaces, and you grin at a competitor across the table. He is a spice merchant with a beard that looks like a bird's nest, but his grin is warm. Here, you are allies in one thing only, making the day pass more gently. A dog yaps from under the table, chasing a loose chicken, and the entire group breaks into a howling laugh that nearly upsets the board. You catch the board before the lion pieces tumble, and everyone exhales, grateful. These moments matter more than a perfect throw. Historians still puzzle whether these boards were meant to symbolize rebirth, with the snake uncoiling again and again, but you can see how it works as a shield. Even a conversation about a price hike feels easier to swallow after a friendly game. The street musicians begin tuning up nearby, pipes, tiny hand drums, the steady clapping of a rhythm that makes your foot tap on its own. Someone starts humming along, and the spell of the market feels gentler than before. You almost forget that one crooked official might be taking notes, trying to blackmail half the square before lunch. Mayhem, you realize, is the glue of these tense commercial alliances. By rolling stones, people soften their grudges, reset their rivalries, and find a way to talk about neutral things. The snake on the board is like a kindly matchmaker, weaving enemies into something closer to friends. Your next throw comes up perfect, and you move the lion token forward with a triumphant flick. Your opponent claps in a show of respect. There is a kind of poetry in these gestures. No one dares curse. No one dares boast too loudly. Everyone is watching, but for once, they are watching the game, not the gossip. Another merchant with sunburnt cheeks leans in, retelling a rumor about how the pharaoh once played Mayhem to choose which general would guard his tomb. The story is half legend, half wild fantasy, but the group listens, wide-eyed. Maybe it's true, maybe not. The scholar priests still can't agree. Your eyes linger on the snake's spiral, wondering why such a simple pattern can feel so soothing. Maybe because it repeats. It returns to itself. It promises another chance, another turn. In a world where everything can vanish in a blink, that promise is as valuable as gold. You rest your hands on the board, breathing deep, letting the market sounds wash over you. Behind the measured laughter and clack of dice, life is still hard, still dangerous, but somehow easier to bear. One last throw, and you land your lion on the final circle, the snake's tail. You let out a satisfied sigh. The other players chuckle, clapping you on the shoulder. You sense an unspoken respect, as if your skills have bought you a tiny passport into their circle. The sun climbs higher, burning through the thin linen canopy, and a faint breeze brings the scent of mint leaves and sheep manure. You rise, stretching, and thank your companions with a quick nod. Their smiles tell you the same truth. They needed this break just as much as you did. Walking away, you still hear their dice rolling, laughter bouncing off mud brick walls. Politics waits like a coiled cobra, ready to strike. But for now, Mehen guards them, at least until the next crisis. You step away from the bustling markets, weaving through narrow lanes shadowed by temple walls that rise like silent giants against the sun. The scent of sacred incense curls from hidden courtyards, mingling with the raw aroma of goats tied near the entrance. These are the domain of Egypt's priests, the men who keep the gods fed, the omens read, and the people's hearts stable. You slip through a side doorway, ducking under a lintel painted with falcons, and find yourself in a quiet colonnade. The hush is deep enough to smother your heartbeat. Here, priests recite endless chants to hold the world together. And yet, behind closed doors, when the scrolls are rolled away and the sacred statues veiled for the night, even these guardians of cosmic order let their shoulders drop and their dice clatter. You glimpse them around a low table, gray linen robes pooled around their ankles, rolling knuckle bones across a faded board. Their laughter is cautious but real, like a small river under ice. You shuffle forward, curious, watching as a middle-aged priest with crooked teeth tosses the dice with a flourish worthy of any street gambler. The head priest, whose voice has called down blessings from Horus himself, leans in to measure a throw, lips twitching with a grin. You catch that moment of pure human delight. It almost breaks the spell of his holy authority. Historians still argue whether priests really approved of gambling or merely tolerated it, but here in this moonlit cloister, they clearly need it. A copper lamp guttering on the table reveals the board itself, a worn piece of polished wood etched with crude lines and faint symbols. Its patterns echo the cosmic order they guard in their daily work, but here they break free of all that crushing weight. They are just men again, trying to feel a moment's joy away from endless prayers and rivalries with rival cults. One priest playfully scolds another, "You're cheating the gods," and the table erupts in muffled laughter. Another rolls his eyes, claiming Hathor favors him. The pieces move across the board in a dance that looks like a silent rebellion, a tiny revolution against the constant fear of the wrong ritual, the wrong word, the wrong sign. You breathe in the sweet scent of blue lotus wafting from a vase. Even the gods you suspect would not begrudge these men their hour of play. After all, you can only watch so many funerary processions before needing to laugh. One priest sets down his cup of beer, foam still clinging to its rim, and challenges the head priest to a best-of-3 match. The stakes? A simple favor during the next sunrise ceremony, a bit of extra sweeping, or a turn minding the oil lamps. Nothing dramatic, but still important in a place where status is measured by who carries which sacred tools. You realize these games serve more than fun. They redistribute stress. They let the small pecking orders settle without resorting to poison or gossip. You'd think men of the gods would be above that, but you see the same hungry gleam in their eyes, the same petty triumphs. One priest rolls perfectly, sending his opponent's piece back to the start, and raises his arms in a ridiculous, silent cheer. You nearly laugh out loud, caught up in the softness of this secret moment. The head priest fakes a scowl, but then breaks into a wide grin, reminding you of an uncle trying to look tough in front of children. Historians still debate whether these priests use such games to predict the future or simply to relax. But you know what you see. Relief. Like a cool breeze against hot stone, these dice are a balm. Outside, temple guards shuffle, their spears tapping against limestone. You lean back, noticing how the rhythm of those guards blends with the quiet clatter of game pieces, creating a strange lullaby. You wonder if even the statues of the gods, towering with painted eyes wide, might wish to join this moment of peace. A moth flutters close to the copper lamp, drawn to its glow, then drifts away, unharmed. The priests move their pieces again, negotiating who takes what square, laughing when they land on a cursed space, arguing in good-natured tones. One suggests that losing the game is actually a blessing, sparing him from carrying the heavy ceremonial drum tomorrow. Another insists he is the favorite of the gods and will never lose. There is a sly, knowing grin on the head priest's face. He rolls the dice, wins the round, and claims his prize, a chance to skip a particularly foul-smelling incense duty the next morning. You see everyone applaud, then pour him another sip of beer. You notice a small amulet resting near the lamp, a tiny cat carved in limestone. It watches the board with frozen eyes, a lucky charm against trouble. Maybe. Some say priests believe their own cats could carry prayers to Bastet herself. Quirky, sure, but comforting. A fly buzzes close, landing on your wrist, then darting off as a breeze moves through the colonnade. The night feels cooler now, the sounds of the marketplace fading to a distant hum, leaving only the gentle flow of words and dice here behind the temple walls. These priests, who speak of life and death daily, have found a tiny oasis between. A game, a laugh, a contest of luck that matters not one bit in the cosmic balance. Or maybe in its own way, it matters more than all the temple gold combined. You close your eye a moment, breathing with them, letting the game's rhythm slow your pulse. For tonight, at least, there will be no political conspiracies in these walls, no poison in the beer, no priestly rival ready to smear a reputation. Just the soft shuffle of pieces across the wood and the faint chuckles echoing through the columns. You open your eyes, catching one last grin from the head priest as he lines up for a final throw. Maybe the gods are smiling too. You leave the temples behind, their echoes of chants still humming in your bones, and wander through crooked alleys toward the home of a wealthy scribe. The clay walls are warm from the day's sun, holding the heat like a sleepy cat. You duck through a wooden doorway, blinking at the lamp-lit courtyard inside, where family members have gathered around a plain board marked with squares. The air is rich with the scent of lentil stew, garlic, and a hint of sweat that clings to a hard day's labor. Here, the politics are closer to the skin. Fathers scold sons for missing grain quotas. Sisters jab at each other's marriage prospects. Cousins argue over the price of a donkey. In these walls, everyone has something to gain or lose, and the stakes feel as sharp as a butcher's blade. But tonight, there is a temporary truce in place. They play a game older than anyone in the house can remember. The board is simple, neat rows of squares with painted symbols, perhaps inherited from a grandmother who once saw the pyramids still shining white. You join them, settling cross-legged on a worn mat, the rough weave itching at your knees. A matriarch with a gold nose ring explains the rules with a voice like sandpaper, while the others eye each other warily. You can sense how quickly small insults might spark a family feud, but the game acts like a safety valve, letting off the steam. Historians still argue whether these home games trained families to negotiate or simply distracted them, but the effect is obvious. After a few throws of the dice, the air grows calmer. You lift your piece, a tiny clay dog, feeling its cool surface against your palm. It is chipped, bearing old scratches, but you sense the stories hidden in it. Maybe someone once used this same dog token to mend a family argument. Maybe it saved a marriage or calmed a jealous uncle. You place it on the first square, and the matriarch lets out a low laugh. He thinks he's clever, she teases, sending a ripple of chuckles around the circle. Even the youngest children, perched on their father's knees, giggle. For a moment, everyone is on the same team. The next roll goes badly for you, and the others cheer your misfortune in good fun. You roll your eyes, letting the moment land, soaking up the gentle teasing. A brother smacks his older sister's shoulder lightly, scolding her for cheering too loudly. She sticks out her tongue, and the whole group laughs. These games are like a glue, holding the family together through hard harvests, funeral debts, marriage disputes. You watch a father, brow creased from years of tax ledgers, relax as he moves his piece ahead. He nearly smiles, as if the board lets him pretend there is one place in life where the rules are fair. The lamb sputters in the breeze, casting fluttering shadows against the courtyard's mud brick walls. You catch sight of a painted lotus on a chipped pot, and it seems to sway, as if nodding along with the rhythm of the dice. Your next move is a good one, sending your clay dog ahead to a safe square. The table gives a respectful nod, acknowledging skill, but no one grows truly angry. That's the magic. All grudges pause, if only for a turn. One child, barely taller than a water jar, asks if he can play next. His mother pats him on the head, promising he'll get his chance. It reminds you of how powerful these moments are, carried across centuries. Historians still puzzle over whether the rules of these games were identical from household to household, but the feeling, you suspect, was the same. A sigh of relief in a world where a careless word could ruin a name. Someone fetches dates from a clay jar, passing them around. You bite into one, its syrupy sweetness sticking to your fingers, mingling with the dry dust of the game board. Another player jokes that sticky fingers bring bad luck, which gets a fresh round of laughter. A donkey brays outside, startling the youngest boy, who nearly tips the board. A collective gasp, then relieved laughter as the pieces hold steady. The matriarch fans herself, shaking her head, but even she grins. You can see how fragile these peacemaking moments are, balanced on a carved square and a lucky roll. You roll again, praying silently for a good number. The dice tumble over each other like tiny bones from the gods. You land just shy of victory, and the family groans dramatically, clapping you on the back. Their kindness feels like a warm blanket, a soft, protective lull. The father gathers his children close, reminding them not to fight tomorrow about chores. "Remember how you played tonight," he says, voice gravelly but gentle. It feels almost like a prayer, and everyone nods, absorbing the lesson in their own quiet ways. A breeze swirls through the courtyard, rustling the reeds tied above the gate, and carries the lingering sounds of the marketplace far away. In this moment, the only thing that matters is who gets to move their piece next. The matriarch glances up at the night sky, where a single star peeks between clouds, and mutters a blessing under her breath. Maybe for her children, maybe for you, maybe for every family trying to survive these dangerous years. You place your clay dog on the final square with a triumphant grin, and the family claps again. There is no prize but peace, no trophy but a shared memory that might keep tomorrow's quarrels from turning into war. The laughter rises, soft and sweet, mingling with the night air. Tomorrow, the father might scold his sons. The sister might argue with her husband. The grandmother might complain about the price of onions, but tonight the board has made them a family again. Dawn seeps across the Nile's edge, where the air still smells of damp river mud and the first stirrings of 1,000 waking birds. You wander along the bank, past fishers hauling in their tangled nets, until you come to the outer walls of a garrison. Soldiers, dusty and raw-boned, shuffle about with that half-dead look of men who have seen too many knife fights, too many punishments, too many commands, barked by men twice as scared as they pretend to be. You slip through a gap in the wall, ducking past the watch captain, and find yourself in the soldiers' courtyard. Here, the rules are simpler than any court or temple. Obey orders, or get a spear through your belly. Yet even among these rough, iron-willed fighters, you catch the glint of dice in the sun. Their board is a battered scrap of painted wood, its edges splintered, its surface smudged with old wine and maybe blood, but still precious. It is a symbol of their own fragile sanity. These soldiers sit cross-legged, knees almost touching, rolling dice with a focus more intense than their weekly weapons drill. One, missing half his front teeth, crows over a lucky throw, pounding the ground with a calloused fist. Another feigns outrage, his voice so raspy you wonder if he even remembers how to laugh. But here he is, laughing anyway, because the dice tell no lies. Historians still argue whether soldiers learn tactics through games, or if these matches were only distractions. But you can see plain as day, they need this. The air in the courtyard feels lighter than the gloom of parade formations. As you watch, a young recruit hesitates before a throw, whispering something to the goddess Neith for luck, the tremor in his hands betraying a terror he'd never show in a skirmish. A crow caws from the parapet, loud enough to drown out their groans of defeat. You look up and half expect it to shout orders too, but it just flaps away, leaving behind a faint sense of mischief. The soldiers continue their game. One clutches a piece carved like a scarab beetle, claiming it brings luck because a scarab never stops rolling forward, just like them, on forced marches through foreign deserts. Another jokes that if he loses, he'll volunteer for stable duty, mucking out horses instead of carrying a spear. They play hard, these men, with the same competitive edge they bring to war. But no one gets truly angry. Losing on the board is better than losing on the battlefield. One man, big as a bull, stands to stretch and reveals a crude scar that wraps around his ribs. He notices you watching and smirks, as if to say that all wounds fade except those on the inside. You remember something you overheard once, a high-ranking commander quietly betting food rations on a dice match. That is how desperate even the powerful can become to soften the dread. Maybe that commander knew his orders were sending half these boys to their deaths and couldn't bear it without one moment of stupid, harmless fun. The dice clatter again, skipping across the boards with the grace of startled lizards. Another perfect throw, and the group erupts in cheers so loud you half expect a superior to come storming down. But no one does, because for this one stolen hour, even the bosses know better than to interrupt. A gentle wind rattles the bronze fittings on their battered shields. You trace your fingers along the edge of the playing board, feeling the tiny cuts and stains, the scars of laughter that have lasted longer than some soldiers ever lived. The sun climbs higher, catching on metal spearheads stacked against the far wall. Their sharpness is a harsh reminder of what waits beyond this courtyard. Yet the game continues, the men leaning closer, the faint scent of garlic and stale beer rolling off them like a loyal guard dog. A boy no older than 16, eyes still wide with half-formed innocence, tosses the dice and lands on a square that earns him a round of applause. You can see the pride bloom across his face, the kind of pride that won't get him stabbed if he flaunts it here, in this safe ring of laughter. They shift their positions, stretch their legs, argue about rules, then dive back in with all the focus of a pharaoh plotting a war campaign. The board is their kingdom now, and for once, no one is trying to conquer them. Historians still puzzle over whether the soldiers brought their boards to battle camps or if they carved them new wherever they camped. You suspect it was both. Who wouldn't carry a piece of peace with them, folded away like a prayer, in a world so ready to break them? The commander finally strides into view, face hard as granite, but instead of barking orders, he watches with a small, grudging smile. Maybe he knows he needs his men whole in spirit, not just in body. One soldier, out of nowhere, jokes that the commander should place a bet if he's so confident. The courtyard freezes. For a heartbeat, you think blades might be drawn. But then the commander snorts, folds his arms, and says he'd rather gamble on them living through next week. A hush, then a ragged round of laughter. You lean against a pillar, a grin sneaking across your lips. There's no easier way to prove loyalty than laughing together. These men, hardened and filthy, are as fragile as any priest, or noble or merchant, needing the same soft shield of a silly game to keep the world's teeth from their throats. A distant horn calls them to drill, and they groan, gathering their spears. But one by one, they tap the board in a quiet ritual, like a promise to return, to keep something gentle alive between all the killing. As you follow them out into the dust, you hear a final shout. Don't forget, I'm beating you next time. The echo bounces off the courtyard stones, carrying just a little hope. The sun slides down in a buttery smear across the mud brick walls, and you slip through another quiet courtyard where the scent of honey cakes and date wine clings to the air. Here, the mood is gentler, but no less charged. This is the haven of young lovers, entangled in complicated emotions. They arrive under excuses of sharing news or borrowing oil, yet their eyes do that hopeless, sticky dance that no one mistakes for casual visits. You settle onto a bench as two lovers unroll a faded gaming cloth between them. It's simple, with a handful of squares and a set of clay tokens shaped like birds. They argue over the rules, half flirting, half bickering, and you grin as they nudge shoulders. The tension of unspoken jealousy flowing right into the patterns of play. In Egypt, love and envy weave tighter than any linen, especially when families meddle and arranged marriages hover like hawks. These games are the only safe place to confess a hidden hurt or slip a joke about a rival suitor without opening a full-scale drama. You watch the woman, hair braided with tiny shells, flick her token across the board and laugh triumphantly. The man winces, pretending deep agony, then steals a kiss on her cheek as punishment. Everyone chuckles, even you. Historians still argue whether these lovers' games were meant to test compatibility or just distract from strict family plans, but you can see how they work. The rules are fair, unlike most love stories. A servant carrying a tray of fig jam pauses to watch them play, shaking her head with a smirk. Maybe she's remembering her own days of chasing affection between stern parents and hot-headed brothers. The man teases his partner, calling her a cheater from Hathor's own temple, and she rolls her eyes, flicking a piece that knocks his right off the board. Another burst of laughter. The moment softens the kind of poison that often festers between jealous hearts. You lean back, letting their banter wash over you. Outside, arguments about dowries, property, and family alliances never rest. But in here, the board acts like a polite referee, keeping blades sheathed and tongues in check. The woman grabs the dice next, shaking them like she might squeeze out a miracle. She tosses them with a fierce little prayer, eyes glittering. The stones land just how she hoped, and she squeals, clapping her hands. The man sighs dramatically, then says he will demand another round to win back his honor. The game becomes a courtship in miniature. Every lucky roll is a promise. Every risky move, a flirtation. They joke that a bad throw means bad marriage luck, and the girl smacks him on the arm for saying it out loud. It's adorable, if also a little heartbreaking, given how little choice many lovers had in their destinies. A night breeze slips through a reed curtain, fluttering across the board, and for a heartbeat, you catch the smell of river water, heavy with lotus pollen. Somewhere, a frog croaks, making the couple snicker again. You notice how skillful they are at turning a fight into laughter. Maybe that's the true power of these games, to let people say things they're afraid to say directly. He jokes about her mother's scowl. She mocks his clumsy dancing, and neither takes it personally because the dice stand between them like a gentle referee. Historians still puzzle if these games carried coded messages. Some think they mirrored rituals meant to secure fertility or blessings from Hathor, goddess of love. Whether that's true or not, you see how they calm fears, smooth out jealousy, and keep young hearts from shattering under family pressure. The man tries a bold move, sending his clay bird to the final square. The girl gasps, eyes wide, but then laughs, pulling him into a clumsy hug that nearly knocks the board over. A nearby ant pretends not to see them, even though you're sure she's listening with both ears. A neighbor's cat darts through the courtyard, chasing a beetle, adding a streak of chaos that makes everyone giggle. The lovers catch their breath, reset the board, and begin again, as if the game itself has woven them together tighter. You sip from a cup of beer someone passed around, the faint bitterness mixing with the sweetness of date syrup. The courtyard seems softer, lit by lamps glowing like quiet moons. The girl leans forward and whispers that if he wins, he can ask her anything. He raises an eyebrow, suspicious, but accepts, tossing the dice with a solemn flourish. They clatter across the board, and he wins. A grin splits his face, bright as any sunrise. He asks, "Promise you won't marry that pottery merchant?" She freezes, then blushes, then laughs and agrees. Only here, between a game's rules and a hopeful heart, could that be safely said. A wave of relief breaks through the courtyard, like someone had opened a window after days of stale air. You exhale, sharing their peace, marveling at how fragile love can feel in a world that wants to divide, judge, and control it. Their game goes on, neither wanting it to end, because when the final throw comes, so might real life, arranged marriages, parental scolding, bitter gossip. As long as the dice are moving, they are free. And so you watch them, wrapped in flickering lamplight, battling over tiny clay birds, forgetting for a precious moment that their future might be carved in stone somewhere else. The night deepens, folding itself like a black linen cloak around the city, and you slip away from the lovers' courtyard into a side alley where half-finished statues stare with blank eyes. There you catch a strange sight. A group of scribes hunched over a board, whispering and snickering, almost conspiratorial. Their laughter is sharper, tinged with a mischievous edge. You lean closer and see they are playing a game you recognize, Senate, but with a twist. Each piece is painted with satirical faces. One looks like a pompous priest. Another is suspiciously similar to the pharaoh's chief advisor. And a third is a caricature of a royal guard, with his eyes crossed like a startled goose. These pieces are a private, defiant joke, moving across the board in a parody of power itself. One scribe leans forward, grinning wide enough to show crooked teeth, and says, "Look, the advisor fell in the water square again." The group bursts into a muffled giggle. In this tiny circle, they are fearless, mocking the mighty in a place where no one else dares. You see how the board gives them permission to vent what they could never say in public. Historians still argue whether these games carried secret protests or were merely private jokes, but you feel the simmer of rebellion in every flick of their pawns. The next player bumps the priest piece off the path, sending it to the underworld, and everyone erupts in stifled cackles. These scribes, so mild by day, wield quills and ink to record the pharaoh's glory, but at night they slip the chains and giggle like children tearing down a bully's poster. A clay oil lamp sputters, casting shadows across the board, and one scribe mutters that the pharaoh himself would never dare play honestly, or he'd lose faster than a desert fox in a lion pit. Another scribe mimes a dramatic collapse, rolling his eyes, making the group nearly collapse with laughter. You settle nearby, pulled in by their courage. It feels dangerous, thrilling, almost heroic to see them mocking a system that could crush them if it ever noticed. These games are their weapon. No swords needed, just carved figures and quick wits. The night breeze threads through the alley, carrying a whiff of garlic stew from a neighbor's pot. A strangely comforting scent in this hush of conspiratorial fun. You breathe deep, letting it anchor you while the scribes plot their next silly insult. The oldest among them, a scribe with a hunched spine and a voice like a rusty gate, lays down a new piece with a sly grin. A small cat-headed token meant to represent a particularly disliked tax official. When it lands on the curse square, they all cheer. Historians still puzzle whether such pieces were ever seized as evidence of sedition, or whether they simply went unnoticed in the ocean of everyday gossip. But these little rebels seem convinced no one will ever bother to look too closely at a game board. You marvel at how brave that is, really. They could have been lashed, or worse, for slandering powerful names, but they go on because their laughter is worth the risk. It cleans their wounds, sharpens their thoughts, and perhaps even builds alliances that no amount of royal gold could buy. One scribe shakes the dice and calls out, "May the gods protect me from my next promotion." The others roar with laughter, each knowing that promotions come with strings attached and dangers hidden behind golden doors. You nod to yourself, realizing this is comedy as armor, humor as a survival tactic. The alley seems to brighten with each round of this game. They keep no strict score, except to crown whoever is cleverest with jokes the winner. You can see them taking turns, exaggerating the most ridiculous court scandal, then working it into the game. a new piece is placed on the board, this one shaped like a toad, representing some unlucky vizier caught stealing temple offerings. A quick joke: if the toad reaches the final square, we all have to bow. A ripple of giggles, and no one dares say no. You lean back against the mud brick wall, letting their voices flow over you, amazed by the boldness of these scribes. In daylight, they will bow to everyone, write documents praising the Pharaoh's glory, and keep every word cautious. But in the quiet of night, they take back their freedom, square by square, throw by throw. Another breeze rattles a woven mat above your head, and the youngest scribe ducks, half sure it's a spy. Then he laughs at himself, shaking off the fear, rolling again. It hits you how deeply this game is healing them. They can say the unsayable, curse the uncursable, even gently test alliances among themselves. Maybe tomorrow they will slip back into their scroll-stained roles, but tonight they are warriors with no weapons but laughter. A cat creeps through the alley, eyes gleaming, tail twitching, and they all pause to greet it. An old superstition, maybe, that Bastet herself protects mischievous tongues. Their dice roll on, and you let yourself believe, if only for a heartbeat, that these little tokens are saving their sanity. It is a sacred ritual in its own rough way, holding the world together by laughing at its worst parts. When the final round ends, they slap each other on the shoulders, stand up stretching, and swear to meet again. For a moment, the night feels gentler, their chuckles still bouncing off mud brick walls, promising each other that until the sun comes up, they are still free. The air turns cool, as if the gods themselves have leaned down to blow across the land, calming the endless chatter of insects and people alike. You drift through a graveyard of massive stone tombs, the hieroglyphs still crisp with prayers for eternity. It is quiet here, eerily so, after the laughter of scribes and lovers, soldiers and merchants. But look closer. Painted on these walls, preserved in the dry hush of centuries, are scenes of games, boards laid out with neat lines, stick dice frozen mid-roll, little pawns held by painted hands. The dead, even in their eternal sleep, refuse to let go of these pastimes. You step inside a burial chamber, where a nobleman's coffin rests in the gloom, flanked by jars of grain, tools, statues of servants, and, of course, a Senate board. The wood is as smooth as the day it was carved, a final companion for the journey through the Duat, the great beyond. Historians still argue whether these games were meant to ward off demons in the afterlife or simply remind the soul of better times, but you can see why no one would want to leave them behind. You kneel by the painted walls, tracing the images of players in eternal contests, their smiles calm, their movements graceful. In life, These games had been shields against rumor and intrigue, against harsh talk and shifting alliances. In death, they promised the same refuge, forever. One figure on the wall is shown with an elaborate headdress, rolling the dice with an expression that feels almost smug, as if he has conquered something no war or ceremony could touch. Maybe he had. You wander further, past the silent guardians of Anubis and the watchful eyes of Horus, to another tomb where simpler people lay buried. Even here, scratched into plaster with rough hands, you see boards drawn in charcoal, tokens left behind. No gold, no fancy offering tables, just a promise that someone wanted to carry their favorite game into the afterlife. It makes sense, doesn't it? When you spend your days tiptoeing around deadly gossip and royal tempers, you'd want to keep your one safe place with you forever. Even if Osiris himself is judging your heart, maybe you'd ask him for one more match, one more roll, before stepping into eternity. A faint breeze stirs the dust near your feet, lifting a scrap of linen, and you remember the lovers, the soldiers, the priests, the merchants, all hunched over their boards, claiming tiny islands of calm. These people needed that peace as badly as they needed bread and beer, maybe even more. You place your hand on a carved square, wondering if the soul who played it had ever found true rest. Maybe they did. Maybe they found it in those patterns, the familiar rhythm of dice and pawns, repeating like a prayer until the world's cruelty dissolved. The torch sputters low, shadows creeping around you like half-formed dreams, and you sense a kind of hush settle, as if even the gods are listening. You imagine an ancient soul stepping up to a cosmic board, tossing the sticks one more time, daring the gods themselves to play fair. That is the gift of these games. A pause button on fear, a small rebellion wrapped in rules, a safe place where you can outwit even fate, a last defense against the worst parts of the living, and maybe against the terrors of the dead. The tomb walls hold these scenes tight, unwilling to let them fade, because in their simplicity there is something deeply holy, something no pharaoh's decree could take away. You rise, brushing sand from your knees, and feel the cool stone press into your palms. Out in the night, the desert winds pick up again, rustling the papyrus reeds, sweeping the dust back into its familiar corners. If you listen, you can almost hear a faint roll of dice echo through the centuries, as if the dead still play, still laugh, still hold on to that tiny spark of joy that once protected them from the knives of palace conspiracies and the sharp tongues of neighbors. It is a good dream to chase, you think, one last game to shield you from the final silence. The desert night grows softer, its winds calming like a mother's hush across your brow. You let your breath slow, feel your shoulders loosen, and watch the flickering lamp dim to a quiet glow. Every echo of thrown sticks and sliding pawns seems to settle now, drifting down into the cradle of sleep where no politics can follow you. Let your mind hold that image of painted boards laid out in neat rows, of laughter and teasing among the living, and even among the dead. Let it settle you, as steady and familiar as a lullaby. Every square you cross, every token you move, is a reminder that there are still ways to find calm, even when the world seems hungry for your mistakes. Breathe in, feel that warm hush of a courtyard breeze, and know that all the schemes and worries of 1,000 kings cannot reach you here. Imagine your own game board waiting beside you, patient, welcoming, always ready to shelter you from harsh words and cruel turns of fate. As you let your eyes close, remember those painted players on tomb walls, forever rolling their dice, forever taking just one more move, free of every heavy burden that life had thrown upon them. Sink deeper into your pillow, hearing the soft night hum, and rest easy. For tonight, no Pharaoh scribe will write your name on a punishment scroll. No jealous rival will poison your drink. No scandal will chase you down. Only the quiet patterns of a simple game will hold you, gentle and safe. Sleep now, carried on the timeless rhythms of a game that never ends, and dream of your own peace moving calmly through each square until morning finds you whole once more.